He was 11 years old, barely tall enough to touch the net. But there he was, dropping defenders, draining NBA-range threes, and breaking ankles like a veteran in a kid's body. His name? Julian Newman. And if you were on YouTube in the early 2000s and 10s, you knew the hype. He wasn't just a young player, he was a viral phenomenon, featured on ESPN, all over Ballast Life, talk shows, NBA halftime events. He was the next big thing. Some called him the next Steph Curry. Others said he was the future of basketball, the prototype for the modern, flashy, highlight-driven point guard. He had swagger. He had a handle that could humiliate grown men. He had the spotlight, and he was born for it. Julian Newman wasn't supposed to be a question mark. He was supposed to be a blueprint. And yet, fast forward to today, Julian's not in the NBA. He's not on a G League roster. He's not even in the conversation. So what happened? How did one of the most hyped young basketball prodigies of the internet age go from global sensation to basketball ghost? This is the rise, fall, and reality check of Julian Newman, the viral star who vanished from the league he was born to chase. Before he was a cautionary tale, before the headlines turned skeptical and the views slowed down, Julian Newman was the face of viral basketball. It all started in Orlando, Florida, at a tiny private school called Downey Christian, a place that no one outside of the area had ever heard of. Until an 11-year-old stepped onto the varsity team, barely 5 feet tall, wearing a jersey too big for his frame, and cooked everyone in sight. He wasn't just holding his own. He was dominating. Julian Newman had handles like a Harlem Globetrotter, pulled up from half-court like it was a free throw, and played with a swagger way beyond his age. And then the clip dropped. One mixtape, shared by Ballast Life, Hoop Mixtape, and hundreds of blogs. Julian spinning defenders, launching deep threes, taunting 18-year-olds while being barely 11 himself. The internet exploded. Suddenly, Julian was everywhere. ESPN SportsCenter highlights, interviews on The Ellen Show and Good Morning America, NBA halftimes inviting him to perform ball handling routines, over 10 million views across platforms before TikTok was even a thing. He became a mini celebrity, with kids wearing his jersey and parents bringing their children to his games just to see the prodigy. And behind it all, his father, Jamie Newman, head coach at Downey Christian, and the man behind the Julian Newman brand. Jamie promoted Julian relentlessly. He tracked his stats, created graphics, edited mixtapes, and reached out to every media outlet possible. To some, it was smart marketing. To others, it felt manufactured. But regardless of opinion, it worked. Julian wasn't just the most famous middle schooler in basketball. He was being called the future. Julian's early stats were absurd. Multiple 40, 50, even 90-point games, breaking scoring records in Florida prep hoops, averaging 30-plus points per game as a middle schooler. But it wasn't just the numbers, it was the confidence. Julian didn't just play like he belonged. He acted like he was better than everyone on the court. The game looked fun to him, effortless, showtime. And in an era that was beginning to reward flash and virality, Julian looked like the prototype of the new age point guard. Everyone believed the next step was inevitable. High school stardom, D1 scholarship, NBA draft. But as the views kept climbing, so did the doubts. As the views skyrocketed and Julian Newman's name went global, the expectations followed. People didn't just think Julian would make it to the NBA, they thought it was a foregone conclusion. But as the highlights kept coming, so did the question. And soon they were louder than the applause. The most obvious red flag? Julian's size. While other top prospects were growing into their frames, 6 feet 2 inches, 6 feet 5 inches, 6 feet 9 inches, Julian stopped growing. By his junior year of high school, he was listed at 5 feet 7 inches, and even that may have been generous. He didn't have elite athleticism. He didn't have the burst, the length, or the vertical to compensate for that size. And in a league filled with giants and freak athletes, those inches matter, especially when you're trying to go from viral sensation to Division I recruit. Another major knock? Where he played. Julian spent his entire high school career at Downey Christian, the small private school coached by his father. They didn't play in a top-tier league. There were no national tournaments. Most games weren't against high major recruits. While other prospects were proving themselves at prep powerhouses like IMG, Montverde, and Oak Hill, Julian was dominating lower-level teams and racking up stats, but without much context. Scouts started to wonder, is he really that good? Or is it all just for show? Then there was the play style. Julian's game was flashy, no doubt. Step backs, deep threes, crossovers, trash talk. But as he got older, the flash didn't evolve into structure. There were concerns that he overdribbled. that he didn't run a real offense, that he focused more on highlights than winning, that the viral mixtape version of Julian Newman didn't translate to real basketball situations. And while kids were still watching and reposting his moves, college coaches weren't calling. And let's not forget, Julian was still just a kid. Imagine being 12, 13, 14 years old, and the world already thinks you're the next Steph Curry. Every game recorded, every move critiqued, thousands of strangers commenting on your height, your handles, your future, like it's already written. For most kids, that kind of spotlight is paralyzing. And in Julian's case, it started to backfire. The more attention he got, the higher the expectations became, and the harder it was to live up to them. By the time he hit 17, the buzz had cooled. He wasn't on ESPN anymore. Recruiting analysts stopped talking, and D1 offers, they weren't coming. Julian Newman was still famous, but in basketball circles, he was slipping away. By the time Julian Newman graduated high school, one thing was clear: the viral buzz was gone. He had millions of views, thousands of followers, but not a single Division I offer. No Kentucky, no Duke, not even mid-majors or smaller D1s. And that's when reality hit. After years of being treated like a prodigy, Julian had to face the truth. He wasn't seen as a high-level college prospect. In 2024, Julian enrolled at Bethesda University of California, a tiny private Christian school in Anaheim. It's an NAIA program, a far cry from the NCAA spotlight he once seemed destined for. There was no ESPN coverage, no media frenzy, just Julian and the game. This was supposed to be the fresh start, a chance to prove the doubters wrong, a new chapter where production would silence the criticism. But instead, it was more proof that the gap between hype and substance was wider than ever. In the 2024 to 2025 season, Julian Newman played in 11 games for Bethesda. His numbers? 1.9 points per game, 16.3% from the field. Just 3 made field goals all season. For context, Bethesda played against other small schools, not D1, not even D2 or D3 level. And even there, Julian struggled to make an impact. He wasn't starting. He wasn't scoring. He wasn't leading. The kid who once scored 90 in a high school game now couldn't crack 2 points per night against NAIA competition. It wasn't just disappointing. It was the clearest sign yet that the game had moved on. This wasn't about whether Julian had talent. He obviously did. The handle, the range, the confidence. But talent isn't enough at the next level. College basketball, even at smaller programs, demands discipline, defense, efficiency, physicality, adaptability, and those were all the areas where Julian had never truly been tested or pushed growing up. Years of highlights had built a brand, but not necessarily a complete basketball player. And once you're out of the spotlight, the game gets real, fast. By the end of that season, the narrative had flipped entirely. Julian Newman wasn't the kid who was going to shock the world. He was now the cautionary tale, the example of what happens when exposure outweighs experience. Julian Newman may not be in the NBA, he may not even be in the G League or playing overseas, but don't get it twisted, he hasn't disappeared. Because while his basketball career may not have lived up to the hype, his name still holds weight. And Julian has used that to build something else, a brand. At the height of his fame, and even as his playing career began to plateau, Julian and his family leaned into their visibility with a full media push. In 2019, they launched a reality web series called Hello Newmans, hosted by Overtime, the media brand that specializes in youth sports and behind-the-scenes stories. The show wasn't about wins and losses. It was about personalities, the drama, the pressure, the lifestyle, and people watched. Millions of views across episodes, fans tuning in not just for Julian's game, but for the family dynamic, the bold personalities, and the next chapter of his story. Julian wasn't just trying to be a basketball player anymore. He was becoming a content creator. Alongside his father, Jamie, and sister Jaden, Julian co-founded Prodigy, a sports apparel brand tied to his image. The message? You don't have to wait to go pro to act like one. It was smart and on brand. Even if he didn't make it to the NBA, he was still a face recognized by hundreds of thousands of young hoopers online. The Prodigy brand sells hoodies, t-shirts, custom gear, and it's tied to a lifestyle built on confidence, individuality, and early success. In today's social media era, fame equals value, and Julian understood that better than most. Even today, Julian has over 1 million plus Instagram followers, a loyal YouTube audience, ongoing viral clips from years past, still circulating TikTok and Instagram Reels. His content isn't just about hoops anymore. It's about the grind, the style, and the hustle. He does training videos, motivational clips, and brand collaborations, still playing the role of a basketball personality even if he's not suiting up in pro arenas. And in a time where attention equals opportunity, that's still a lane. Did Julian Newman make it to the NBA? No, but he did something else. He turned his name, built off viral clips, mixtapes, and swagger, into a long-term brand. He became a business, not just a baller. He figured out how to stay relevant in a world where most prodigies fade into the background. And while critics will always bring up the hype he didn't live up to, there's something to be said for a kid who found a different kind of success when the basketball path didn't pan out. Julian Newman's story is a cautionary tale about the perils of early fame and the challenges of living up to immense expectations. While he may not have reached the NBA, his journey offers valuable lessons about resilience, adaptation, and the importance of substance over style. What do you think about Julian Newman's journey? Share your thoughts in the comments below. By the Hoop. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more deep dives into the stories of sports' most intriguing figures.